Nigerians counter Felix Morka's claim on Tinubu's performance.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has outperformed any president in his first term.
The recent claim by the National Publicity Secretary of the All Progressive Congress, Felix Morka, that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has outperformed every democratically elected president in Nigeria is a bold political statement. But boldness is not the same thing as evidence. Morka made the claim while defending the Tinubu administration, arguing that the president inherited an economy that was completely in a mess and that Nigeria has now come out of the woods and at macroeconomic level. But Nigerians have asked a very simple question. By what measurable standard? Because if a government claims to have performed better than every elected government in Nigeria, it must provide clear indicators that allow Nigerians to make that comparison. Saying that the indicators speak for themselves is not enough. First, the Tinubu inherited a mess argument. There is some truth in the argument that President Tinubu inherited serious economic problems. Nigeria had major fiscal challenges, foreign exchange distortions, insecurity, unemployment, and infrastructure deficits before May 2023. But there is an important political problem with Morka's argument. President Tinubu did not inherit the country from an opposition government. He inherited it from his own political party, the APC. Muhammad Buhari governed Nigeria for 8 years under the APC before Tinubu succeeded him. Therefore, when the APC repeatedly blames previous administrations for virtually every structural problem facing Nigeria, Nigerians are entitled to ask, where does the responsibility of the APC begin and where does it end? The APC has governed Nigeria since 2015. That is more than a decade of federal power. So, after 11 years in government, blaming 16 years of PDP rule cannot be the complete explanation for Nigeria's current problems. At some point, the governing party must accept responsibility for the results of its own policies. Second, macroeconomic stability is not the same as economic prosperity. This is perhaps the biggest weakness in Morka's argument. The APC spokesman is focusing heavily on macroeconomic indicators. But government does not exist merely to make spreadsheets, exchange rate charts, and fiscal balances look better. Government exists to improve the lives of human beings. A country can record improvements in certain macroeconomic indicators, while ordinary citizens are still struggling with food prices, transportation costs, rent, electricity bills, school fees, and healthcare. That is why Nigerians should be careful about the phrase, "we have come out of the woods." Come out for whom? If the government says the economy is improving, Nigerians should be able to feel that improvement in their pockets. If inflation slows, but prices remain extremely high, the family that could previously afford a basket of food and can no longer afford it will not necessarily feel that economy has recovered. If government revenue increases, but the cost of living continues to squeeze households, citizens will understandably question the meaning of the recovery. So, the real test is not simply whether macroeconomic indicators are improving. The real test is whether economic growth is translating into better living standards, more jobs, affordable food, stronger purchasing power, and greater economic security. Third, the claim that Tinubu has outperformed every elected president is too broad to be seriously tested. Morka's statement covers every democratically elected president. That includes Olusegun Obasanjo, Umar Musa Yar'Adua, Goodluck Jonathan, and Muhammad Buhari. To say Tinubu has outperformed all of them requires a transparent scorecard. What exactly are we measuring? Economic growth, inflation, employment, security, infrastructure, debt management, electricity, healthcare, education, anti-corruption, human development? If the APC can produce a credible scorecard showing that Tinubu's first term is superior across these categories, then Nigerians can debate the evidence. But without such a scorecard, the claim remains political rhetoric. Indeed, reporting on Morka's interview noted that when asked about the indicators supporting his assessment, he did not provide a detailed comparative measurement. And that is the central problem. You cannot make an extraordinary claim and then ask the public to supply the evidence for you. Fourth, reforms can be necessary and still be criticized. Another argument from Morka's defense of the government is that Tinubu deliberately chose difficult reforms instead of populism. That deserves some acknowledgement. Economic reforms are often painful. Removing fuel subsidy and changing foreign exchange policies were difficult decisions, and the government argues that they were necessary to correct long-standing distortions. But saying that a reform is necessary does not automatically make every consequence of that reform acceptable. A responsible government must be judged not only by the courage to make difficult decisions, but also by how it manages the consequences. Who pays the price? Who receives the benefits? How effectively are the savings deployed? Are vulnerable Nigerians protected? Are jobs being created? Are public institutions becoming more efficient? Are citizens getting value for the additional revenue available to government? These are legitimate questions. Criticism of the implementation of a reform does not necessarily mean opposition to reform itself. Fifth, security cannot be left out of the scorecard. You cannot convincingly argue that the government has outperformed every previous democratic administration while asking Nigerians to ignore insecurity. Economic performance and national security are connected. An investor will not feel completely confident in an environment where businesses face security threats. A farmer cannot produce effectively if he is afraid to access his farmland. A family cannot enjoy economic growth if kidnapping, terrorism, communal violence, or banditry remains a constant threat. Therefore, any serious assessment of the Tinubu administration must include security outcomes. The government deserves credit wherever security improves, but where Nigerians continue to experience insecurity, that must also be acknowledged. A balanced assessment cannot be a catalogue of achievements without corresponding attention to failures. Finally, 2027 will be the real test. Morka's statement is ultimately political because the APC is preparing to defend Tinubu's record ahead of the 2027 election. Reports indicate that the APC intends to make Tinubu's performance a central part of its re-election argument. That is perfectly legitimate. But elections are not won by slogans alone. The APC can say Tinubu inherited a difficult economy. The opposition can say the administration has made life harder. The government can point to reforms. Critics can point to hardship. But ultimately, Nigerians will make the judgment. And Nigerians are not simply economic statistics. They are the traders who buy goods every morning. They are the civil servants paying school fees. They are the young graduates searching for jobs. They are the farmers worried about security. They are the transport workers facing high fuel and maintenance costs. They are the businesses struggling with operating expenses. These people will judge government performance based on their lived experience. Conclusion. So, Felix Morka is entitled to defend President Tinubu. That is his job as APC spokesman. But Nigerians should demand something more than political declarations. If Tinubu has truly outperformed every elected president, show Nigerians the numbers, show Nigerians the jobs, show Nigerians the purchasing power, show Nigerians the security improvements, show Nigerians the infrastructure, show Nigerians the reduction in poverty, show Nigerians the measurable improvement in education and healthcare, show Nigerians how the benefits of these reforms have reached the ordinary citizens. Because ultimately, the question is not whether the government can produce impressive economic language. The question is whether the average Nigerian can look at his or her life and honestly say, yes, things are getting better. That is the standard that matters. And as the 2027 election approaches, Nigerians, rather than political spokesmen, will have the final word on whether President Tinubu has truly outperformed every previous democratically elected president. Until then, Morka's claims should be treated for what it is, a political assertion that will require compelling evidence.